You can't own peace, but people sure try. That's what my granddad used to say when he handed me the keys to his old mountain cabin. I never really understood what he meant. Not until the day a white envelope showed up on my porch with 3 bold letters stamped. Across the top, HOA. It was a cold morning in October. The fog clung to the pines like it was afraid to let go. I was sipping coffee on the porch. The kind of silence you can feel in your bones when the mailman dropped that envelope like it was cursed. Notice of violation, it read in angry red letters. Apparently, I'd violated community standards by not painting my cabin a regulation-approved shade of autumn, beige, which was funny, because I didn't even live in their damn community. My cabin sat on 3 acres my granddad bought back in the 60s, long before the subdivision down the hill existed. At first I laughed, thought it was a mix-up. So I called the number on the letter. Homeowners Association, this is Carol, said a voice that could cut glass. Hey, Carol, I think there's been a mistake. I'm not part of your HOA. Oh, she said sweetly. If your address is 112 Pine Hollow Lane, you are part of Pine Hollow Estates. I'm not, I said. My land isn't inside your boundaries. That's not what our map says, she replied. You'll need to comply within 10 days or face daily fines. Click. That's when I stopped laughing. See, my granddad wasn't just a man who loved the woods. He was smart about land, the kind of man who read every line before signing anything. So I dug through his old safe, the one that smelled like cedar and old tobacco, and pulled out the deed. It was all there, the boundaries, the coordinates, the official county seal, and something else, a second deed, a forgotten one. The old man hadn't just bought the cabin land. He'd bought the access roads leading into the subdivision below, before anyone built there. And according to county records, he'd never sold them. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with both deeds spread out in front of me, the paper yellowed and fragile under the lamplight. My granddad's words echoed in my head again. You can't own peace, but people sure try. The next morning, I drove down to the county recorder's office. The clerk, a guy with reading glasses halfway down his nose, looked at the papers and whistled. Well, son, he said, tapping the signature line. Looks like you own every inch of road those HOA folks drive on. I smiled for the first time in days. Then I guess, I said, it's time I send them a letter. The next morning, I typed up a letter that read more like a warning than a response. Dear Pine Hollow HOA, before issuing further violations regarding my cabin, please review your property boundaries. The roads you maintain, use, and claim authority over are legally owned by me. Kindly refrain from contacting me again. Regards, Ethan Miller. I sent it certified mail. Then, just to make sure they couldn't ignore it, I attached a copy of the deed. A week passed before I heard anything. It came in the form of a knock. Not a polite one, the kind that rattles the doorframe. When I opened it, 3 people stood on my porch. Carol, the same woman from the phone, and 2 men in polo shirts that looked more like uniforms than casual wear. Mr. Miller, she said with that smile that doesn't reach the eyes. We received your letter. Unfortunately, your claims are invalid. Those roads were part of our developer's transfer. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? She handed me a binder, thick as a Bible. Here's everything proving otherwise. I flipped through, and there it was. A copy of the same plat map I had, except someone had drawn in boundaries that weren't legally filed. A fake. I handed the binder back. This isn't a legal map. You can color outside the lines all you want, but it won't make it true. Carol's jaw tightened. You can't stop us from enforcing HOA regulations. I stepped off the porch and pointed down the hill. That's funny because to reach your houses, you've got to drive up my road. The taller man, probably her husband, scoffed. You wouldn't dare block it. Try me, I said. They left without another word, tires spitting gravel as they went. 2 days later, I started getting letters again. Fines, warnings. One even threatened. Legal action. It was harassment. And I had enough. So I filed my own notice, not to them but to the county. Temporary closure for maintenance on all the access roads under my ownership. Legally sound, completely enforceable. That Friday morning, I set up barricades at both ends. Bright orange signs reading, Private road, no access without owner's consent. You could hear the chaos echo from down the hill, car horns, shouting, confusion, HOA members calling each other, wondering why their neatly organized lives had just come undone. By noon, Carol showed up again, red-faced, phone in hand. "You can't do this!" she barked. "You're trapping people in their homes." I smiled. "Funny, you didn't seem too worried about trapping me in your rules." Her voice cracked with fury. "We'll sue you." "Go ahead," I said. "But make sure your lawyer drives carefully on my road getting here." For the first time, she had no comeback. Just the sound of tires screeching away in defeat. I leaned against my truck, watching the sun dip behind the trees, and whispered to myself, "Granddad, you'd love this part." But I had no idea. The storm was only getting started. For a few days, the barricades stayed up. The HOA board scrambled, calling emergency meetings in driveways, waving papers and threatening lawsuits. But the truth? They didn't have a leg to stand on. The county confirmed it. My deed was valid, airtight, and older than their entire subdivision. Still, I didn't want a granddad had taught me better than that. "Don't fight fire with fire," he said to say. "You'll just end up with ashes." But I did want them to understand something. Power doesn't come from paperwork. It comes from respect. 3 days later, a county sheriff's cruiser pulled up my drive. The deputy stepped out, hat in hand, and said, "Mr. Miller." HOA filed a complaint. "Mind if we talk?" "Not at all," I said, handing him both deeds. He took one look, nodded, and smiled. "Guess I'll be telling them they're trespassing, not you." When he drove off, I knew I had the upper hand. But I also knew if I kept playing this game, everyone would lose. So that night, I loaded up my truck with coffee, folding chairs, and a big sign that read, "Community Meeting, Open to All." I set it up right at the barricades. The next morning, as the first few cars pulled up, people looked confused, cautious even. Then they saw me pouring coffee. Carol arrived last. Still looked angry, but less sure of herself. "Morning," I said. "Coffee?" She didn't answer right away. Then, with a sigh, she took the cup. "Look," I said, "I get it. You all wanted to protect your neighborhood. But this cabin's been here long before your HOA existed. My granddad built this place with his hands. He believed in peace, not paperwork." One of the younger guys from the HOA nodded. "We didn't know. The developer told us everything here was part of the association." "Developers lie," I said softly. "But that doesn't mean we have to." Carol finally spoke. Her voice cracked a little. "We just wanted things to look uniform, safe." I smiled. Safe doesn't have to mean the same. Sometimes difference is what keeps a place alive. Silence. Then, slowly, heads started nodding. That afternoon, I took down the barricades. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. The HOA agreed to update their maps and stop enforcing rules beyond their boundary. A few weeks later, a small envelope arrived. Inside was a handwritten note from Carol. "You reminded us that ownership isn't just about land. It's about understanding. Thank you for teaching us that." I pinned it to the wall next to my granddad's photo. The woods outside were quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that comes from isolation, but the kind that feels earned. I stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming in my hand, and looked down at the winding road below. "Guess you were right, Granddad," I whispered. "You can't own peace, but you can build it. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about revenge. It's about teaching respect. When someone tries to take what's yours, don't just fight back, show them what integrity looks like, because peace isn't given. It's built, one honest road at a time.